Alright, so I am picking up with question number 5 in the quiz here. Again, this is to help you understand if you missed things, why you missed them, so that going forward on that exam that's coming up, you won't miss the same types of questions. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I'm figuring out a concrete pattern. So I refer to these as a concrete patterns because they're made up of pictures or concrete objects. Alright, and so the frame number and the number of squares are written below here. This is the mystery frame. So I put it in bold, though some people I think still kind of missed it. Below is the base, which is all of the horizontal squares. So that means it is this part of the pattern. It's all of the horizontal. So anything that's built is going to be built above these two. Okay? So the first thing I needed to do was count, all right, exactly how many squares are there. There's 18 squares. Right? So for me, the first thing I want to do is figure out, hey, if there's 18 squares, which frame number is this? Because then that's going to tell me the rest of the answers, really. Okay? So if I look here at the horizontal bases, on frame 1, there's 3. Frame 2, there's 4. Frame 3, there's 5. So that tells me that the number of squares in the horizontal base is 2 more than the frame number. So if there's 18 squares across the bottom here, this is 16. All right, so my frame number is 16. So now I go back up here, and I'm going to say the number of squares that must be added to complete the frame. So that means, what am I adding on here and here in order to complete this frame? So I'm going to go back and I'm going to again say, hey, if I base it on the frame number, how many squares are there in the vertical posts that are either side? So in frame 1, it's 1 high. Frame 2, there's 2. Right? I'm not counting the horizontal because I've already got the horizontal counted. Frame 3, there's 3. Okay? Of course, they're on both sides, so that's a total of 6, so I have to keep that in count. But what's important to me is to know how many squares would I put here, and it's frame 16. So that means there'd be 16 squares. Same on this side. So 16 squares. So the number of squares that must be added to complete this frame, 16 of them here, 16 of them here. That's a total of 32. All right, so the total number of squares on the mystery frame is 32 plus 18, which is going to give, which is going to give me a total of 50. All right, so that's question 5. All right, and last but not least, we are going to do question number 6. So on this one, I accepted 2 different answers. It didn't matter to me which way you decided to approach it. So some students approach this recursively. All right, so I'll do that first. And if you approach it recursively and you write a formula, there's 2 things you have to write. You have to say, all right, what's the first term in the sequence? So that's a sub 1. So a sub 1 is 6 because we're talking about the perimeter. And then we have to say, what's the pattern? What do you do to get from one term to the next? So to go from 6 to 10, you add 4. And to go from 10 to 14, you add 4. So I could write this formula and say a sub n. So when I want a term in the sequence, I call it a sub n. I have to take the term before it. So recursion means I have to know that. And if I don't, then I have to keep working backwards till I know it. but I take the term before it, and I add 4. So that is a recursive formula, and that got full credit if you had all of the notation correct. Okay. Another way to do it was explicitly. And for explicitly, remember, we don't rely on the previous number. We rely on the frame number. So one way I like to kind of think about this one is to jump ahead in time a little bit. Right? So what if I wanted to draw the 7th, okay, frame of this sequence? Well, I wouldn't want to just keep adding on and draw frames 4, 5, 6, and then 7. I want to go straight to 7. So if I want frame 7, I am looking at 7 of these hexagons, and I'm going to try to draw it pretty quick. Okay, that didn't work well. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. Might be a crazy way to do it, but I think it's going to work. Okay. I don't really even care about these inner lines because they don't count as part of the perimeter. All right, so I drew it very quickly. So the frame number tells me how many of these hexagons are stuck together. So I've got 7 of them. And if I want to do the perimeter, pretty quickly look at this and say, hey, this is 2 for each hexagon. So it's 2 times 7, right? Or 14. And then the bottom would be 2 times 7, 14 more lines. And then I've got this guy here, right, and this guy here. And that's my total perimeter. So I've got the 14 plus the 14 plus, and then I'll add those together, the 2 more, right? So that's a total of 30, right? If I'm on the nth frame, well, then across the top, right, I'm going to have, instead of 7, I'm talking about the nth frame, I'm going to have 2n. All right, so when I say my perimeter, I'm going to have 2n across the top for the nth. Across the bottom, same deal, right? 2n. And then I'm always going to have this one on this end, this one on this end, so I'm going to have 2 more. Right? So you could leave this as is, leave it as 2n plus 2n plus 2, perfectly fine. Or we could call this 4n plus 2. And you can back up and make sure that this formula is working. So like for frame 3, I plug 3 here. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 2 is 14. Bingo. Frame 2, I plug 2 in here. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 2 is 10. All right, so I feel pretty confident. That is my explicit formula. I don't have to get the answer recursively. So this was explicit, this was recursive, and that's it for the screencasts on the quiz. I hope you're feeling better about these types of questions and their answers.